Hi, and welcome to the Flex with Aaliyah. Today I'm talking about some more Beast Games behind the scenes stuff. So, if you've been following along, the Beast Games that Jimmy O'Donnell came out with in December has been on Amazon for several weeks right now. And I had the amazing privilege and opportunity to be a part of it, which was so cool. And I had a couple episodes where I had some people on. We talked about how we got selected, what the Vegas preliminary segment was. So on this one, I'm going to talk all about the behind the scenes, phase two, we'll call it. So once Vegas ended, they said that we would be informed of our next travel part. So we went home and we were just waiting for emails and stuff like that. We didn't hear anything for a little bit. And then we got notified that we were going to be going to Toronto. Some people were going to be flown directly there. Others were going to be flown to Buffalo, and we were going to be bussed into Toronto. Yes, I was one of the people who had to fly to Buffalo and then get bussed to Toronto. And we flew to Buffalo. There was a caravan that was meeting people. They had it pretty well organized. I would say this one was so much more organized than that Vegas segment. I believe they changed organizations with who was handling that part, which was a great change because it made things so much smoother. And we got bused to a hotel where we were given a voucher for dinner, and we got put in certain buses. We were told what group we were in, group 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And that was how the buses were going to leave. I was in the second bus, so you had to get up early, you had to be down there, and then you had to make sure you had your passport and all these other documents signed. And they collected them, you marched onto the bus, and off you went. There was a bit of excitement, we'll say, once we got to the border. There were some people who were not allowed in, who got sent home. There was one of our buses. We were like, what is taking so long? And we were supposed to go right through, but we actually had to now get out of the bus, go through a whole security check before we could pass through the border, because the previous bus, someone had weed. And they didn't claim it, and so there was a little bit of a snafu there, which affected all the other buses at that point. And we sat at Border Patrol for so long. And once we finally got off the bus, had the dog sniff us, had people check everything, we were able to get back on and go through. There was a little checkpoint where we stopped at a park and we were given lunch, and we continued on our way. Once we got to wherever we were going, someplace in Toronto, it was a hotel that was organized for medical devices, wardrobe, all that stuff. We had no clue that we were going to be fitted for wardrobe and have our photos taken. So we had just been on the bus, and we were probably sleeping, a little bit of mess. Some of us looked good, some of us not so good. I did not have my hair done, which I was a little upset about because I would have done it if I knew, had my poof up, but you got to roll with the punches. So they marched us in. They kept us in the bus for a little bit, and then we got escorted in. And it was a very smooth, organized process. We were so surprised. A number of us were concerned that the organization was going to be just as not so amazing in Vegas, but they turned it around. It was phenomenal, smooth sailing, very efficient, and organized. So we did all of, here's our paper, here's our medical, where are you from, here's your documents, all that stuff. Then we sat down, then we got ushered into a line for wardrobe, and then they brought us in. They took a photo. The wardrobe consisted of a top and bottoms, shoes, socks, undergarments, the whole shebang. And we weren't allowed to take it. Record our number because we were given a number from the flag game. And if you didn't know your number, you were screwed because that is pretty much was your identification. And they also had given you a little wristband that had somehow it was related to technology because they would scan it. So they always kind of knew where you were, or when you passed certain games, it was involved in that as well. Once that was done, they took us to our hotels, and we were staying at different hotels because there's so many of us, 1,000 of us. And then they also had alternates just in case extras, something happened. And we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. So pretty much you were just sequestered there. I made use of the hotel gym, as did many other people. And some of the individuals let us walk outside around the hotel. So that way we could get some sunlight and some air. They walked with us because we weren't allowed to be alone or leave the premises. So did a couple of laps. That was exciting when we got to do that. And I think all of us had trauma from Vegas with the food situation where we weren't getting a lot. So when we had these meals that actually were buffet style, so we were all eating so much more out of fear for when we go to the games that we will have nothing. And that was actually very shocking to us. There was dessert, which we never got dessert. And so that was very comical. But the food actually was very good that the hotel was supplying. Then once that day had finished, they dropped our uniforms off or our outfits off outside of our room. And the next day we were supposed to wear them, show up at a certain time. We got ushered onto buses and went to another hotel where we sat in an auditorium, and they went over all the legal stuff again. They dyed their eyes, crossed their T's, all that stuff. And then we sat there we sat there waiting for that to happen. And then once they went through that, we sat again because they were calling out our numbers to go on buses. And it's not like it was 1 through 100 go on this bus. It was in a systematic way that they had planned that pertained to the visual of entering for the first show, that first episode. A lot of us afterwards were like, we could have done this a lot faster if you just told us. We would have been able to organize that and get it situated than trying to listen to this one woman with a microphone in a sea of 1,000 people trying to organize us. So once your number called, you went out, you got in line, you got lunch, you got on a bus, and then we bused to where we were going. And then once we got there, we sat in the bus for a while, and then they had someone come on the bus and give us a little spiel, and then I got mic'd up. I had been mic'd up in the Vegas, so they came on, they called people's numbers, my number was called, so I went out, they mic'd you up, then you went back on to the bus, and you waited and waited. Our bathroom in our bus was gross, and then it stopped working, which when you're sitting there for so long, you're going to have to go, and you have however many buses filled with 1,000 people. When they got off, we had to go in order through this security segment to make sure we didn't have anything inappropriate on us, whether it was a weapon, a phone, whatever it was, because we were instructed to leave all technology back at the hotel since we were returning there later that night. So it was just ourselves in this space, and then we had to go to the porta potties. They had these stations set up, and we really had to go because we were seeing the buses for so long. And finally, they had us set up inside this space. We still hadn't seen it. We didn't know what to expect. They had it so organized that certain buses went to certain positions. And then they did this countdown, and they said, okay, walk out. And you're going to walk. They told us how we were going to walk, where we were going to. And we walked on to this set of platforms, stepping over them until you got to your number, and then you stopped. And that was how it was organized. And that was for the grand entrance shot. But there was a group of people, numbers 1 through 100. I don't even know if they actually used it. I'd have to rewatch the clip. They took them and did a whole entrance thing with them the night prior. But from watching it, I don't recall seeing anything special about that. Then we were just staying there on our platform, which had a slit down the middle, and we're all speculating what that means. Is it going to take us into the next level? Is it going to eliminate us? And we also have this screen on a tablet on our platform with a GoPro as well. Every platform was identical. Of course, they have the main producer guy come out, tell us what's going to happen. They give us the synopsis, and they said, whatever you do, don't touch your screen unless you want to touch your screen. And that first segment was a bribe. And I'm going to talk about that in another episode, not this one. I'm not going to talk about the games. This is just kind of the behind the scenes. So there was that bribe portion. We went over the rules, how it was going to do, what was going to happen. Some things that they didn't show that took place during that bribe was that there was a proposal. There was a proposal. I was so surprised they didn't show it. But one of the guys took the bribe. His girlfriend was still in the game, and after they did the celebratory thing with the money with everybody who took the bribe, Jimmy and this guy walked down the thing. Everyone's watching. We're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And he proposed to his now fiance, which was kind of cute and exciting. I don't know that I would want it done that way, but it was probably very exhilarating in the moment, especially since he took the bribe and got something, right? After that happened, all we did was wait and wait and wait. And then we went back on the buses, picked up a dinner lunchbox, and we went back to the hotel. And then the next day, same thing. We weren't allowed to leave the hotel. People utilized the gym. We walked outside. There was a crazy rainstorm one of the days, which if you watch the show, when you go, people went to the city, it actually was flooded. It was flooded. So that kind of threw a wrench in the mix, and they had to think on their feet and postpone going to the city because of that. But that comes later. So we're at the hotel, and there was also a meet and greet. We didn't really know, but some people knew things or heard somehow. I'm not sure if they became very friendly with the producers who leaked information. I don't know. But people were whispering that Jimmy was coming to the hotels, such and such and such, because we got a notification that said meet in the food area at this time. And then they asked people to line up. I happened to be like number 2. And they took 10 people at a time into a tiny conference room, and then through a back door, Jimmy walked in. Before we could go in, we had to place our cell phones, put everything away, and then we went in, and Jimmy walked in through a side door, and we got to do a Q&A, which was really cool because it was a more intimate setting than when you see him on the show where there's 1,000 of us, people are screaming at him, you have his fans. And so this was a smaller session where you got to ask a whole bunch of different questions. Some of the questions were really stupid because people were like, so tell us the first challenge. It's like, obviously he can't tell us that. You've just wasted a question. And then Chandler came in. I think there was one other of his friends there as well. And that was really cool and unique to be a part of for that. And then, obviously, we're waiting for all these emails about when things are going to happen. We get notified that, okay, the next day, you're going to put your night bag, which has your undergarments, any toiletries you need, contact cases, things like that, in this baggie. Everything else, electronics, suitcases, is going to get locked up. And you had to separate it out and check it in. And we did that the following morning. And you were only going to take that baggie that you set up if you made it onto the next round, which was into the city. So once that was done, we waited for our buses, got on our buses, got shuttled to the hangar where the filming was being done. Again, we had to wait for our buses. It went a little faster this time. We were given lunch bags to take in and told to sit on our platforms. And there was definitely some stress going on that day. There's a lot of drama that day because we didn't know what the challenge was. And I happened to hear, I had gone to the bathroom or changed my food because it was roast beef, and I don't eat roast beef, so I was changing out my lunch. And I came back, and some people in my row were like, did you see that? And I was like, what? No, obviously I did not. What are you talking about? And apparently rules for this upcoming game populated on the screens and monitors. It's like, holy shit, that's not cool. That's not fair. How did that happen? Because normally it's very specific, and we don't get the information until we need to know, which is that main producer telling us that was creating so much drama and stress. People were going down the aisles trying to convince people to leave, trying to figure out why they were there. Some people had no clue what was happening. People still weren't even present yet. And so it was very stressful because it's like, oh, was it fake? Why would they? How could that possibly populate? There's no way they could have leaked that instruction. Was it intentional? Is it fake news? What is it? That instruction ended up being the right challenge. So what was meant to be an hour when Jimmy was like, go, they posted 60 minutes on the clock. Got done in 10 to 13 seconds because people already had an idea of what was happening, which felt very unfair and stressful. And it was done in a blink of an eye, pretty much. That specific challenge was a self-sacrifice challenge. Someone in your row had to sacrifice so the rest of your group row could move on. I happen to be in a row where nobody self-sacrificed, so I didn't make it that far, not because of skill or social dynamic, but because nobody wanted to self-eliminate. And then we ended up having to drop to the floor because that's what happened. And what takes place in a matter of moments on the screen is over the course of so many hours of prep, waiting, instruction, more waiting. The game is actually the shortest part of the whole thing, that 10 to 13 seconds, and then it was done. And then we just had to sit there upset at what had happened. And yes, I will admit, I was pretty upset. I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but I was frustrated that I didn't even get to do anything. It wasn't an active challenge, not physically active challenge, but there was nothing that was skill-based, so I had no control over it. And that's the part I didn't like that was very bothersome to me. I didn't get out because I didn't do well. I got out by pure chance. And yes, there's so many of us, 1 in 1,000 of winning is not a very high odd. It's more odds than I had before, but it's still very stressful because you do change things or adjust things in your personal life to make sure you can be present for this. Like how I had to organize my business without telling my members and conveying the excitement of it and structuring who's going to cover what classes at the gym while I'm away actually wore on me. It was very taxing and stressful because I didn't know how it was going to be perceived by my gym members. Other people stopped going to school. They were in college and they stopped. Some people quit their jobs. So it was a very interesting dynamic where all different backgrounds, people were making adjustments in their life to be present. So to get out on that, it was pretty shitty. And then we just waited to be dropped through the floor. I actually ended up being the first group that dropped, which was great because then I didn't have to wait as long as the other two. And when they did us, they did it like domino style. And you fell about 10 feet into a foam pit. And then there was like a little side door that someone on the outside had opened that you got out. And then they ushered us through to the out processing segment where we had to tell them where we were supposed to go in terms of travel, get our items back, turn in all the clothes, every single item, even the wristband that they gave us, that they let us keep from Vegas, this one they kept because they didn't want anything to go out. Even the socks and the shoes. You had to go to the medical if you dropped anything off to get that back, things like that. And all that was being done. And then you just waited to get on the bus. And then when the bus came, it took you back to the hotel. They gave you a food voucher. For me personally, I actually had a world championship that I was not sure if I was going to go to. And if I was making it far in this show for the opportunity, I wasn't going to go to the world championship. Lo and behold, I happened to get out the day before, and so they actually organized that for me and flew me to where the World Championship was going to be so I could be present. I didn't get any sleep that night, maybe like 2 hours, and then I had to get up, get the Uber, go to the airport. And I was already flying, and then I was getting notified by other teammates that, oh my God, Lego's coming in. There's people are being pulled from the airport. It's like, I'm already in another state. Like, what's happening? So I had people trying to update me on what was happening, and it was because of the instructions flashing for that self-sacrifice game before everyone was present and people were contesting that. I agree that that wasn't fair. And how could something like that so big for this huge show happen? I obviously didn't see it, but I knew of it because people were telling me, oh, did you see that? And so do I believe them? Are they fucking with me? I don't really know. And that was that scenario. So that's my behind the scenes recap of Toronto and what I was a part of. And then I'm going to have more because I have friends and individuals who stayed on longer who will be on the show to talk about that, which is very, very exciting. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Flex with Aaliyah. I'll catch you next time. But until then, like, subscribe, share, and of course, stay flexy.